Hi, my name is Percy. I migrated to Australia from the Philippines 26 years ago. The name Percy is actually my nickname. It's very common for Filipino parents to give their child a nickname. Mine happens to be Percy. Migration is a major global phenomenon. We all know that. I'd like to share with you my thoughts about how I see migration as the wilderness of my life, and how I find this relevant to the Lenten theme, Be Open, Led by the Spirit. The last time I checked, there are currently 10.2 million Filipinos living outside the Philippines as overseas workers, as permanent residents, or as naturalized citizens of that country, like me. Not one Filipino is left untouched by the negative and positive consequences of this large-scale, sustained, and somehow organized waves of movement and dislocation that began in my country about 5 decades ago. One thing that sustains many Filipino migrants in this wilderness of migration is our faith in God. When we move countries, we lose half our lives. What we never lose is our faith in God. I'll take you back to the year 1978. I was 11 years old. I remember crying myself to sleep because I was terribly missing my mother. She had left earlier that night for London, where she found work as a domestic helper. I remember clearly a yellow mosquito net and this annoying light coming from a fluorescent lamp. I remember waving at an airplane as it took off earlier that night. My mother told me she would come back. To an 11-year-old, that meant the next day. Of course, my mother didn't come back that next day. And to me, she was gone for an awful long time, and I missed her every day. We all missed her, my father, my sister, and my cousin who lived with us from birth. A year after my mother left, on the 1st of May, a big fire destroyed our entire neighborhood, which sits on several blocks of disputed land. Like many families in that neighborhood, we lost all the house we rented and all the belongings and memorabilia. We lost 11 of our 13 cats and one of our 2 dogs. From the ashes of this great fire rose a mushroom of shanties, and one of them was the shanty that my father built. It was made of plywood that eventually warped in the rain. We had a roof made of corrugated iron sheets held together by nails, rocks, and old tires, anything that would keep the iron sheets from being torn away during strong typhoons. My father furnished our shanty with improvised furniture. He made a couch out of a dismantled car seat. He made a dining table out of an old fridge door. He connected a plastic tube to an old sink so that water would drain out to a nearby open sewage. We lived in the slums for about 10 years, and as children, life was fun. In the slums, I found the most generous, loving, and kind-hearted people. In my mother's absence, it was this neighborhood that helped my father nurture us 3 children. And to my pioneering migrant mother, we are forever grateful. After 4 long years, my mother finally visited, but only for a brief 1 month. After that, she visited at an interval of 3 or 4 years. These family reunions were filled with hugs, gifts, and unspoken guilt, because she had missed many special family celebrations, birthdays, graduations, milestones, but money kept coming, and this afforded us good education and better prospects. My sister and I eventually graduated from a private Catholic university, and our cousin graduated from college. Eventually, my mother bought us a proper house, and we finally left the slums. Shortly after, my father joined my mother in London, and a few years later, my sister followed. But then I was already 26 years old, and instead of following them, I chose to marry a 27-year-old Englishman from Devon, who had just migrated to Australia at the time. But both being new migrants in Brisbane and with both our families living so far from us, this marriage ended after about 10 years. There was a time when I saw myself as a victim of migration. But now I see myself as a gift of migration because I've had life experiences and learnings from two starkly different countries. I offer a different perspective. I offer a different expression of faith. I offer a different take of the future of the Australian church. And this adds to the richness, variety, and vibrancy of a growing multicultural church in Australia. My own migration to Australia was and still is my wilderness. Over the last 26 years, I had experiences of isolation and belonging, of rejection and acceptance, of racism and welcome. Having been blessed with a beautiful daughter, I bravely embraced an important vocation of single motherhood. Not a single life vocation, but a single parent vocation. There's a big difference. About 3 years ago, and quite late in life, that was the time when I entered my 50s, I reached a bittersweet milestone. After renting for what seemed like forever, my daughter and I finally purchased our first home. It's a tiny home, but a far cry from the shanty that I once called home. Of course, this is not the "and they lived happily ever after" part of the story. We are still thousands of kilometers away from our families in London, Devon, and the Philippines, and our life is still fraught with trials and tribulations. Our lives are forever in transition. Now I'd like you to multiply my story by the 10.2 million Filipino migrants around the world. Different life situations, but similar experiences of wilderness. I believe that God is with us in this wilderness of migration, transition, and transformation. We place our trust in the Spirit. We are open to a life of hope.